Hey guys, today we're going backwards a little bit. We're going back to solving quadratic equations. You might be thinking we've already done that. You're right, we've already done it using factoring, but today we're learning about the square root method. There's actually 4 different ways to solve quadratic equations: by factoring, the square root method, completing the square, and the quadratic formula. So this is just our second way, but before we really begin, I want to talk to you about our answers. Normally, right, when we solved quadratic equations with factoring, we always got 2 answers, or usually got 2 answers. The same thing is true for this. We're almost always going to have 2 answers. And there's a specific reason for that. Look at this. If x equals the square root of 64, well, very easily, that just means that x equals 8, right? There's only one thing that x equals without getting into i's or all of that, right? Well, over here, we kind of have the same problem. X squared equals 64. But this one's a little bit different because there's actually 2 numbers that we can square to equal 64. Check this out. We can go 8 squared equals 64 and negative 8 squared equals 64. So this one actually has 2 answers. X could equal 8 or x could equal negative 8. So just like that, we're going to have 2 answers for a lot of our problems. So if we had x squared equals 64, we could say x equals 8, x equals negative 8. And we also could write it in a third way, and that is x equals plus or minus 8. So you're going to see that plus or minus symbol pop up every now and then. That's going to show that it could equal 8 or it could equal negative 8. So let's dive in and let's try number 1 here. To solve using the square root method, here are our steps. Step 1, we're going to get the squared term by itself. Okay, so we're going to get the squared. If it's the parentheses, we're going to get the squared parentheses by itself. If it's the variable, we're going to get that by itself. Step 2, we're going to square root both sides of the equation. The squared and the square root are inverses and cancel each other out. Okay, so if you square root a squared number, it cancels the squared out. But do not forget to put this symbol, the plus or minus symbol, on the side that didn't have a square root. Okay, step 3, finish getting the variable by itself if necessary. So take a look at number 1. The first thing we're going to do is get my squared variable by itself. So we're going to get that x squared by itself. So to get that x squared by itself, I first need to minus 14 to both sides. That gives me 2/3 x equals 6. Then, how do I clear out a fraction? This was back in our very first lesson. To clear out a fraction, we need to multiply by the denominator. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. So we're going to get 2x equals 6 times 3 is 18 because multiplying by 3 and dividing by 3 cancel. Then don't forget our squared. Oops. Okay. Then we're going to divide both sides by 2. And we're going to get x squared equals 9. All right. So here's our answer. X squared equals 9. But we don't want to know what x squared is. We want to know what 1x is. So to get rid of this squared, we're going to do the inverse operation of squaring. And the inverse operation of squaring is square rooting. So I'm going to square root this side and square root this side. The awesome thing is the square root of x squared is x, because the squared and the square root cancel. They are inverses of each other, just like addition or subtraction, multiplication or division. They are inverse operations. Then the square root of 9 is 3. But do not forget that we need to write a plus or a minus 3. Because 3 squared equals 9, but negative 3 squared also equals 9. So that's what my answer could be. X equals plus or minus 3. This is my answer, but we could also write it like x equals 3, comma, negative 3, like that, okay? Doesn't matter which way you write it, but those are our answers. All right, now let's take a look at number 2. So number 2, we have 3x squared minus 60 plus 60 equals 0. First step, we're going to get that x squared by itself. So I need to move this 60 over, get 3x squared equals negative 60. Divide both sides by 3. And we're going to get x squared equals negative 60 divided by 3 is negative 20. Okay, now we're going to square root both sides. And so that's going to give me x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 20. 20 is not a perfect square. Maybe I can simplify it, but I cannot get the exact number that goes into, that multiplies by itself to equal 20. So we work to simplify it, but it's okay to have a square root as your answer. But we're going to take 20, and I'm going to cake it. We're going to go 20 divided by 2 is 10. 10 divided by 2 is 5. This is why we've been doing all this practice with square roots. I'm going to circle my pair of 2's because we have a pair of 2's in common. I'm going to bring that to the outside. I also have this negative in here. Square root of negative is an I. So let's rewrite this. We're going to have x equals plus or minus, bring a 2 to the outside, bring an I to the outside, the square root of what's left over, which is 5. So my answer is just going to be x equals plus or minus 2i square roots of 5. You can leave your answer like this, or you can write positive 2i square roots of 5 or negative 2i square roots of 5. Once again, that's what our plus or minus is for. Okay? All right, let's move on to number 3. So number 3, start off, get x squared by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by 5. And I'm going to have x squared equals 405 divided by 5 is going to be 81. Okay? So we have x squared equals 81. I'm going to then square root both sides. We're going to get x equals plus or minus 9. So x could equal 9 or x could equal negative 9. Like I said, though, you can leave your answer like this, or you can write your answer out in a kind of longer fashion. That's just what it means. Okay? All right, now let's move over here. And let's take a look at this guy, number 4. So number 4, we have x minus 7 squared equals 100. Look at this. This whole x minus 7 is being squared, the whole thing. So that means that I can square root this entire side to cancel out that little guy. Okay? So we're also going to square root this side. So that means we're going to get x minus 7 equals plus or minus the square root of 100 is 10. Okay, so I still have something left over. So that means from this point, I kind of need to switch my problem into 2 separate equations. We're going to split it into an x minus 7 equals positive 10 for my plus, and x minus 7 equals negative 10 for my minus 10. So we get 2 very separate answers, but they're both valid. We're going to get x equals, if I add 7 to both sides, we're going to get x equals 17. If I add 7 to both sides here, we're going to get x equals negative 3. So there you have it. We have 2 separate answers. Both are just as valid. Okay, guys, let's go ahead. Let's go to our next page. So you look here, number 5 and 6. So number 5, we're going to have to solve for the thing that is being squared. And the thing that is being squared is that x plus 2. So to solve for that x plus 2, here's the big kicker. I cannot distribute. Okay? I cannot distribute into my parentheses that's being squared. We can't do it. Okay? So I'm going to have to get rid of that 2 by dividing it. So we're going to start off by adding 5 to both sides. That's going to give me 2 times x plus 2 squared equals 13. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And so I'm going to get x plus 2 squared equals 13 over 2. Now, to get rid of this squared, I'm going to square root. That cancels out that squared, cancel that out, so we just have x plus 2 equals the square root of 13 over 2. Okay, 13 over 2. Well, actually, back up. It's not just 13 over 2. It's going to be plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. Remember what I've said, though. We cannot have a square root in the denominator, right? So to clear out the square root in the denominator, we're going to have to do some work. I'm going to take that square root of 13 over 2 over to the side, and I'm going to multiply it by the top and the bottom of square root of 2. So the square root of 2 times square root of 2 equals 2. The square root of 13 times the square root of 2 is the square root of 26. Then we'll check and see if 26 can cake. It cannot. It's just 2 and 13. Okay? So that's just going to be what we replace this with. So it's going to be plus or minus the square root of 26 over 2. All right, so now that it's simplified, I'm going to minus 2 to both sides. So my final answer is going to be x equals negative 2 plus or minus, let me rewrite this a little bit better, negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 26 over 2. Okay, so we're using all of the skills that we learned before. We simplify this fraction. Then we just minus the 2 over. We're going to write our whole number in front of my square root. It's going to be negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 26 over 2. All right, let's try number 6 here. So number 6, we're kind of doing the same thing. We're going to start off by dividing both sides by negative 5. So I'm going to have n minus 3 squared equals 40 divided by negative 5 is going to be negative 8. Then to cancel this out, we're going to square root this side, square root this side. And so I'm going to get n minus 3 equals the square root of negative 8. Okay, well I know that we're going to have an I with that. Well, actually first and foremost, we have our plus or minus. Second, we're going to have our I, and then let me take 8 to the side and cake it. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Pair of 2's, that's going to go to the outside, so it's not just going to be an I, it's going to be a 2I. Left over on the inside is going to be a 2. So there you have it. N minus 3 equals plus or minus 2I square root of 2. Add 3 to both sides. And our final answer is going to be n equals 3 plus or minus 2I square roots of 2. Okay? Remember, your Go format is multiple choice. You'll be able to see kind of what your answer should be before you really dive in. Okay? And so don't freak out on your homework about these kind of weird problems. Just be thinking about how we just square root it, and then we just try to simplify it from there. Okay? All right, last problem, number 7. So number 7, a stunt woman jumps from a building 73 feet high. So let's draw a building. So here's our building. We got some windows. We got our stunt woman up here. There she is. There's her hair. Okay, so there's our stunt woman. She's going to jump off of this building, and she's going to land on a pad down here to break her fall. Okay. So the building is 73 feet high, and she lands on an airbag that is 9 feet tall. So that's 9 feet here, 73 feet here. Okay? Here's our equation that represents that fall, where t is the time in seconds. How many seconds will the stunt woman fall before touching the airbag? So here's our hint. Find the time when the stunt woman's height above the ground is 9 feet tall. That's all we got to do. So we're going to take that original equation, and I'm going to plug in 9 feet where that height used to be. So we're going to go 9 equals 73 minus 16t squared. And now we're going to solve for time. To do that, I need to get my whole numbers together. So I'm going to minus 73 to both sides. Oops. Sorry about that. We're going to minus 73 to both sides. And so 9 minus 73, we're going to have negative 64 equals negative 16t squared. Divide both sides by negative 16. And we're going to get t squared equals positive 4. Because negative 64 divided by negative 16 is 4. Then, to get rid of that squared, we're going to square root this side, square root this side. So we're going to get t equals plus or minus the square root of 4 is 2. So t could equal 2 seconds or t could equal negative 2 seconds. Well, she's not going to be falling for negative 2 seconds. She's just going to be falling for 2 seconds. So our final answer here is she's going to fall for 2 seconds. And there's our answer, okay? All right, so remember, just solve for your squared portion. Don't distribute into the parentheses. Just solve for that squared portion, square root both sides, and then try to simplify it from there. Last thing, which one of these can be solved using the square root method? Explain your answer. Listen, this one looks like it can be solved using the square root method because 81 is a perfect square. However, it does not have an equal 0. And since it doesn't actually have an equal sign, we can't solve it. So it's not this one. It's going to be this one because this one does have the equal sign, so we can solve it. All right, guys. I hope this video was helpful for you. Remember, go formative. It's multiple choice, so that'll help you with your answers, okay? Just try your best, and I hope everything goes well. Hope you have a good rest of your day.